What is going on, everyone, and welcome to my Templar healer build. So a lot of you guys said you enjoy watching these kind of videos where I just go over my build and I try to go over everything, try to give you guys recommendations for stuff you can look for. So this healer build is going to be more for endgame PvE, and it does kind of work in PvP as well, but there are kind of like a few things you might have to switch up, which I could talk about. So technically it works for both, but it's more PvE focused, but somehow you could change things up for PvP, which is not too difficult, and I'll explain that in a few. So I'm going to be calling this build the Firestorm build. You guys are going to find out why. Hope you enjoy it, and let's get started. So before we do anything, I'll go over all the gear, food, champion points, skills, whatever else I use. Let's go over what the important ones first, and that is the gear. So, too long didn't read version, or too long didn't watch in any case. Spell power 5-piece, infallible aether 5-piece, staff and this don't really matter, but I'll try to leave some recommendations in the back. So let's go over spell power. This is best in slot for healer. Everyone should focus on it. Now, having the 5-piece of spell power is the most important thing to get. Regardless of the traits, divines is what you want to go for, but as long as you have the 5-piece effect, that is really all that you really want. If you want like min-max top like numbers, then divines is the way to go. But as long as you get the 5-piece, generally it's okay. Next we have the infallible aether. Well, actually, one thing is in spell power, you get it from White Gold Tower. Before you could only get it from veteran. Now you can get it in normal as well, so you can just farm White Gold over and over. It's a DLC dungeon. The difference between vet and the normal version is when you find it, it'll be blue in normal, purple in veteran. And if you want to farm it for the jewelry, then the jewelry is going to be blue as well. So if you do it in veteran, and obviously you can't upgrade jewelry yet, or I don't think ever, but right now the ideal way is to get it from veteran, just to get the purple jewelry if you must. And yeah, so best in slot, spell power gear. If you learn anything from this video, go for that one. And now our second set is the infallible aether. Now I understand not everyone does trials, so I'll try to recommend some other things in the like easier to get items and some craftable ones as well. So infallible aether is from the trials, and essentially you want the 5-piece. The 3 is good as well, but 5 is ideal, simply because when you heavy, you like hit a debuff on the enemy, which allows the enemies to take more damage. And if you're in a group, obviously your DPS should be killing it really quickly. So having the extra spell damage and spell critical is always good, and the 5%. So this is the reason why this is more of a PvE build. And yeah, so sometimes I would say 2 monster set pieces are always good, but this build itself, since you can't use 2 weapons, well, you could for the back bar, but for your healing staff you can't. And obviously healing staff is why you're watching a healer video, so you can't do anything about that one. And yeah, so ideally you're just going to want 5 jewelry pieces, so, and then 3 infallible aether, or 5 spell power and armor, and 3 jewelry for infallible aether, 2 other pieces. Now I didn't upgrade these to gold simply because they are not in divines. Honestly, the difference between purple and legendary, or purple and yellow's status, is not that like high. You won't see like a 5,000 damage increase or anything. It's just to have the slight higher numbers, and it's more for people who can like afford the materials. And honestly, these days materials for everything is expensive, so purple is still fine. Don't worry about it. If you're at end game and if you can afford gold, that's great. If you can only craft up to purple, that's also still good. I could do trials and dungeons with purple. Everyone survives. It's not a big deal. But anyway, ideally you want all divines, but honestly, as long as you have the set, that's all that matters. Alright, so some other pieces you could use in place of Infallible Aether are like the Giuliano set, Kagranak, and those are both craftable. I do believe the Giuliano set is somewhere in Stonefalls, or they could have changed it. There's another thing called Torg's Pact that also, I'll show it to you right now. Torg's Pact, it gives you spell damage, health, spell resistance, and pretty much the cooldown enchantment is decreased by a bit. So Torg's Pact, that one's craftable in Stonefalls all the way. Well, not Stonefalls. Deshawn right here in this Lake Halalu retreat. You can craft it from here. You can go to Way Shrine. This is the fastest way, I believe. And just go up to collect the Torg's Pact stuff. So, this one is completely craftable. Another thing you could look for is if you want to use a monster set, you would have to give up 2 pieces of armor. So if you wanted to do that, you can always go with willpower rings. So you would do 3 jewelry for willpower, and then 5 spell power here for, like, let's say over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you could use your monster set. For that, I would honestly go with either Grothdar or Infernal Guardian. I'm still testing it, but then there's also some other healer sets, like the Troll Kings one. I could show it to you. Oh, hold on. Gotta get this. It's important. Worth. Alright, anyway.
How can I help?
Some other monster sets you can use are this one, the Sentinel's Guise. It's from the Volenfell one, I believe. And essentially the one piece increases 2% healing done, and as a healer, that's generally good. However, it's not, I wouldn't consider it best in slot because if you're a Templar healer, you already have a ton of heals and you'll be fine. After that, you could always use like other stuff for extra damage. Alambris, Infernal Guardian. This is a Kagranak set I used to use just because it gives you a lot of magic and spell damage, so that's always good. But overall, those are a lot of other choices. If you do trials as well, Infallible Aether works. Strategy pieces also work, but I mean, the strategy pieces are a lesser version of Infallible Aether. So if you can get Infallible Aether, that's great. If not, strategy also works. Yeah. So next, ideally, if you want a monster set, you're gonna have to give up 2 pieces of something, and then you have to change your armor around. But if you're just healing, ultimately, it's not really a big deal. So, our healing staff. Torg's Pact. It doesn't actually matter what kind of healing restoration staff you have. As long as the trait is powered, that's all that really matters. And then, if there's anything you should learn from this, is armor, not necessarily required to go like golden or legendary, but weapons are always supposed to be golden. If you can afford it, that's top priority. That goes for any role. Tanking, DPS, or healing, always make your weapons and armor, or weapons golden first and then armor second. So as long as it's powered, that's all that matters. And then this is my back bar. We have a DPS bar. You could have a 2-piece set for the Torg's Pact if you want the extra spell damage, and you could have 2 swords instead of a destruction staff for DPS as well. Ideally, you could get slightly better healing, but it's okay. It doesn't really matter. And then Precise works. You could have double powered. Precise is slightly a little bit better for back bar healing. But if you have a Maelstrom or Master Weapon, ideally that's what you want to go for. It just blows out everything else. So, yeah, that's the armor I had. I gave you some recommendations. Worm Cult pieces. Yeah, Worm Cult is a pretty good one. It's more used for trials than dungeons, but ideally it still works. I've tested it. And Worm Cult is also a pretty good one because it reduces the cost of Magicka abilities by 5% for you and your group. So that's always good. And then Willpower is a cheaper alternative. And Scathing Mage is something you want to, or you could play with, but it's not like the best thing. It's okay. So yeah, that's pretty much the armor that I use. Torx Pack, Worm, Infallible Aether, Kagrenak, Willpower, and yeah, so with that said, moving on to, I guess we'll go over the easy ones right now. The stats I use, I forget, I lost my train of thought for a second. So everything should go into magic. Ultimately, you want to stay above like 18,000 health. Let's use food for a second. So 18,000 health is what you want to be above. That means you won't be getting one-shotted. And, oh, I've got to get one of these. And your Mundus Stone, apparently, after the patch today, it just, like, reset it. And essentially, there's one called the Ritual, and that increases your healing done. So that's the one you want to get, which I should probably get soon, because today is the 12th when I'm recording this, and they had some sort of like 9-hour maintenance, and apparently that got rid of my Mundus Stone, oddly enough. I should actually go check that again. So the Ritual increases your healing done, so that's like top priority. So let's go on to my skills. This is number 2 is my healing. Number 1 is DPS and slight more healing. So let's go into our restoration staff. This is your primary one. Like literally all 4 abilities are right here. So essentially you should know it. But I'll go over all the morphs and my decisions for all the morphs just in case you want to understand my choices. So number 1, I have rapid regen. This one heals up to enemies for slightly more over less time. And it's like a rapid regen. Instead of like 20 seconds, it's 16.5. Now, the reason why I chose rapid regen is because I play with a group of friends that are actually good at this game. So I can trust that they won't be dying as often or at all, actually. So healing them over less time is generally better. And the other morph of this is called Mutagen. Essentially, it's a 20 seconds or 20-second cast or overtime heal. And the difference between that is if the enemy or your allies drop below, let's say, like 40%, they would get, like, the Mutagen would pop, and then it would just burst heal them for, like, another 10,000 or something. So, essentially, if you're playing with random people and you don't know how good they are, Mutagen is probably the safer option. But if you're playing with friends and you know they're good or something, rapid regen is generally a slightly better choice. So ultimately, both options are very good, both morphs, but it just depends on your playstyle. Second ability we have is Healing Springs. I don't even know what the other ability is. Don't get the other ability. Healing Springs is the best one. I don't remember what it was called, actually. But Healing Springs, it allows you to pretty much just heal in a huge AoE radius. And it's like your AoE heal. So next, we have Combat Prayer. Not everyone uses this, but I decided it was good because if you want to go through dungeons, it's also 1, an AoE heal that's like pretty instant. And 2, it gives your teammates a buff, so they would be doing more damage. So it's an expensive skill to cast, but I think it's worth having on your heal bar. So Combat Prayer, the other morph I do believe is a shield instead of like weapon damage that you would give your allies and yourself. It's more like defenses. So generally, if you want to get things done faster, Combat Prayer is the way to go. I do believe some people use the other morph in trials, but ultimately, if you're just doing the overall better choice, is probably higher damage. Now we have Healing Ward. This ability can be replaced with a few other things if you're a Templar. The Healing Ward essentially is your emergency bubble. So let's say if someone almost gets one-shotted and they're like down to 1,000 health and you can't burst heal them, you give them a bubble and it gives them instant heal and then shields and resistances. So just the ward is increased by depending on how much damage your ally has taken. So I kind of have this one just for like emergencies. Some other things you can replace that with is channeled focus or like repentance if you're doing fine. And yeah, that's why we have that. There's a lot of other options as a Templar. I do believe Templars are overall the best class, like for pretty much all roles. Templars are very solid in DPS. They are also very solid healers. I would consider best healers. And I've seen people try to tank as a Templar. I mean, it's not bad, but I mean, I've seen more Templars than other classes except Dragon Knight. And our final ability on our heal bar is under the Mage's Guild. We have Inner Light. And Inner Light essentially gives you more magic by 5% and increases your spell critical rating. So you're going to have this on both bars, otherwise you lose the effect. So that's why you're going to have it on here. And our ultimate, we have Warhorn. It is under the Alliance War, which is essentially PvP. Now I understand not everyone does PvP, so some replacements you could use are Mage's Guild. The Shooting Star also works. Solar Prison if you don't have Meteor as well, but I mean, you probably should get Meteor just because Meteor, if you have the passive, you get 2% extra Magicka recovery and maximum magic for every Mage's Guild ability you have slotted. So like you would have 2%, 4% total. Total max magicka, so that would increase your overall healing and numbers. So that's always good. But if you don't have Meteor or Shooting Star, that's the morph of it. Ideally, you can have... you could use Light's Champion. This one is also... It's not bad, but I just think there are better ones to use. So this is one... Like, I've actually tested it. It's come in clutch situations in some dungeons and trials, like Cradle of Shadows, where... Like, let's say, if you've ever done Cradle of Shadows, you know sometimes some people get eaten, and it'll spawn the colored orbs that you should avoid. Now, this one comes in handy if you're out of resources. It's like an emergency as well. So, it's not bad, but there are better ones. And overall, like, there are a lot of good choices. Nova also works. The Mage's Guild. And then, if you can... I would say the Warhorn or Aggressive Horn is your best like option if you can get it, but if not, those are the other alternatives. So we are on our back bar now. This is our DPS and AoE heals. We use Blockade of Fire. It's the Wall of Elements ability. It is under the Destruction Staff. It's right here. Now the reason why we use this one is because one, we have the Maelstrom weapon, and it essentially, you deal more damage to enemies who are affected by this one. And since we have the Inferno Staff, it gives a fire, which is actually kind of cool looking. But if you don't have it and you're still doing healer, you could always slot Crushing Shock. This one is a interrupt. So, like, if you're doing a dungeon or something, you could always interrupt enemies, bosses, other people casting, and... Crushing Shock is always a good option. There are also a lot of other Templar options as well. Like, if you don't want to put Channel Focus on your main bar, you could always put this on your back bar. Extended Ritual if you don't have that one. Purifying Light is also an interesting option. Or you could slot Blazing Spears, and this one gives your team some more stamina and resources. So this is a very important one as well. It really just depends on what you do. I do switch it out regularly, though, depending on who I'm playing with, and I know like what their skills are, and that's always good. But if you don't have like a Maelstrom weapon, this is probably not needed. I would probably recommend slotting Spears or Repentance, so either one works. Now, everyone's favorite skill that you'll see in PvP, PvE, or just everyone, Jesus Beam to Radiant Oppression. That thing just like destroys things. You can even go like full on pug mode and just beam things from 100% down to 0. Ideally, that's not really what you want to do, but I've seen it happen. So the Radiant Oppression ability is under our Dawn's Wrath. It's a very high DPS execute. And what executes are essentially if your enemy is above or under actually like 50%, they take an additional 330% damage. So I've seen this hit for like 60,000 per tick, and things just die. Everyone uses it, and yeah, it's just a really good skill that pretty much everyone uses. You should use it too. It's very strong. Now on our back bar, our next heal ability is Breath of Life. I would consider this more of an emergency heal as well. It heals 2 teammates for a huge burst. So it's not something you can spam regularly, which I tried to tell people not to do, but I see it anyway. You generally want to be on your main heal bar if more than your back bar. And Breath of Life is more of like an emergency because it's an expensive cast. And it's good for that, but don't spam it. Now, Extended Ritual is usually questionable with channeled focus. Now, I'll show you an example of why I use Extended Ritual. Ooh, this respawned. I gotta take it. I swear it like respawned like 4 times in the past like 20 minutes. So anyway, this is what the channeled focus looks like. You see the huge circle around me? This is the reason why I have it, just because it has a huge circle. Now, what it does is enemies standing inside the circle can activate a synergy, and that allows people to like regain resources if they have the Undaunted passive, and it heals them. And if they hit the synergy, they can like get a burst heal. Now, channeled focus is more for damage a little bit and more defenses. The reason why I don't really use this as often is simply because of this. The circle is smaller, but you get more bonuses in defense, and it's generally something you want to like cast not regularly. So overall, it depends on your playstyle, and people have to be standing inside it. And if you're playing in like a pug group, which is like a pickup group, people usually don't listen. Everyone just does whatever they want. So people standing in a circle is generally not going to be happening. So if you do happen to be playing in that, you could have like the bigger circle. It probably will be more effective, especially if you're doing a trial. It just hits a bigger radius, so that's why my choice is there. And my back bar, I do have the Destruction Ultimate. And essentially what this does is it's kind of like a better version of Meteor, except it has a bigger radius, and it's generally overall like it does slightly more damage according to my tooltip. So instead of Meteor dropping on one target, this is a huge AoE that hits multiple at the same time, not just if the enemies are close by like Meteor does. So that's why I like it. And it also kind of looks cool. You just shoot up like ashes in the sky and then stuff rains down. It's actually pretty fantastic. So those are my skills. If there's anything to get from this one, if you don't have the Destruction Ultimate for some reason, even though you should, Meteor works as well. If you don't have that, Nova also works. Main bar, once again, I went over all of those. So let's see. Next thing we're going to go is in our champion points. I would honestly say that this blue tree is the most important. So remember, you are a healer. Increases the effectiveness of healing done. Max this one out first. This is always a priority. After this, the other 2 choices are Elfborn and Elemental Expert. Now, it really depends on what you want to do. Do you want more DPS, or do you want to heal more by criticals? I've seen people choose both options, and I kind of mix it up because I want to do DPS as well, because you can't heal a boss to death. You actually have to somehow kill them, and if you're playing with a group that doesn't have high DPS, you kind of want to have some more damage with you. So I did this, and generally my crits are fine, so I don't really have an issue. So that's the thing. So priority is blessed, and then how you want to split this off is up to you. More damage, or do you want to heal higher or crits? So that's all. Next we have the Green Tree Tower, and the one to the left of it. So, just like the stamina build, if you are a stamina, max it Warlord out first. If you are a Magicka build, you max Magician out first. Having a reduced cost of abilities is slightly better than having a recovery. So it's an overall passive, while this one is a recovery, which could get debuffed, and recovery is slightly worse than having an overall passive. So I just put 87 points into here. If you actually do roll a lot or block, you could add some points into tumbling or Shadow Ward. Honestly, that part is up to you, but I just put it into 100 here and recovery, so you just have maximum Magicka at all times, ultimately just to play it safe. And once again, this tree is very similar. I would have this pretty much for every single role, whether you're tank, DPS, or healer. How you want to build this is split Hardy and Elemental Defender evenly until you figure out what is like the problem. If you notice you die more to elements, then you slightly put more into Elemental Defender. If you die more to physical, you put more into Hardy. And then if you're just taking a lot of damage over time, you'd want to put some into Thick Skinned. However, now I understand not everyone is max AP, which is probably why you're watching this video as well. So let's say you had 10 champion points. If you get past 50, you start at 10. Put 5 into Hardy, 5 into Elemental Defender. If you have 20 champion points, 10 and 10, and so on, until you figure out what's like better for you. So regardless of what role you are, this is how I would build it ultimately. I even have a very similar one on my DPS, and it seems to work very well for me. So that's my champion points. As for potions, honestly, I just use regular 150 potions like this, and occasionally I do have the Essence of Spell Power. It's the same thing as the yellow one for weapon damage, except for spell damage, spell crit, and restore Magicka and increased recovery. Now these ones are a little bit more expensive, but if you have the money, I would mostly use it for like bosses and trials, just to top off like healing and make sure no one dies. But ultimately, if you're just using regular 150 potions like this, you'll be fine for most content. In fact, you'll be fine with all content. But if you're doing like heavy burning for bosses and trials, I think this one is slightly better. But that's about it for the most part. And one thing I want to show you before we actually wrap up is... Ooh, gotta get this one. Hype. Ooh, 7 of them. That's actually a lot. So your rotation, this is how it works. Usually you would want to start on your back bar, drop this down, and then since this one lasts for a while, and then if your enemy... Let's say... I don't know... Oh my god, I turned around and it respawned. Alright, oh, I didn't even get it. I apologize. But like, once you toss that down, that should last for like 20 seconds. Then you drop your healing springs on your allies, and that will like have dot healing. And then usually you'd want to combat or healing, or what is it called? Rapid regen. And then make sure they get the buff on it. You see how every time I cast it on myself, the buff timer goes up again. So make sure all your teammates are buffed by this one. And then you drop this down, that, and then combat prayer, like this dude right here. We'll just combat prayer him. You can see the little buff that goes on him as well. The combat prayer just shoots in a straight line. So ideally you want your teammates to be lining up, and then they should be getting healed by like 3 things in a row. So after you got your rotation down for that, you don't really need your 4. You don't need to cast your 5. You're just kind of heal for the passive. And then once you get to your healing, you could toss down your 1. Or if you have spears, you could just toss those down as well. And then ultimately you just start DPSing the enemy. And then you watch your enemy, or you watch your teammate's health bar, and that's generally good. So you just don't do that over time. And then just like burst heal. That would be, for the most part, your rotation. And yeah, that's pretty much it. If there's anything else to get from this, there's a lot of different armor choices. Spell power here is best in slot. I guarantee you, anyone you talk to will tell you that for a healer. Best in slot. And then after that, your second set, ideally, that's very flexible. There's a lot of other options. Crafting, Torx Pack works. Kaggernack, Julianos are all craftable. Those work. Some slightly better dungeon ones you could get are Willpower, Worm Cult, Scathing Mage. And yeah, so with that said, hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will try to be doing a tank build, a stamina tank Dragon Knight in the future. But let me know what you guys thought of this one as well. And I will see you guys in a bit. Thanks so much for watching, and have a fantastic day.